Hey everyone, so this is kind of like part 3 of my war this weekend. I'm just throwing out some videos from war just because you guys can kind of see the different type of defense teams that I come across in war, and you can see my approach to them. Sometimes my approach just isn't great, and some of that has to do with just the RNG that is created. Obviously, having a WARRRR rush on the first turn is never a good thing because once he starts to rush, he doesn't really stop rushing. Now, thankfully, my Mercer is a very tanky toon because he's used on my defensive team a lot. So I have that as a benefit. So him being able to survive a Rov's rush was huge. Unfortunately, Mercer in the defensive team was able to rush, and that just really makes this a messy match because Rick has an active skill that can revive a teammate. He also, when he rushes, can provide attack as well as defense. And this type of match is just a real hit or miss for me. So this was definitely a winnable match, but this time just wasn't my time. Anyway, moving on to the next match, I was destroyed right after that. But now we're moving on to some matches against All Jokers Elite. So this is Man on the Moon's faction. We've matched a few times against them so far, and I think we've kind of gone both ways on them. They probably won a couple more than us, but it's definitely always a fun matchup. So this team has a lot of unsafe windowless weapons, and I've actually kind of prepared for that on my Priya. I mentioned this in a different video, but instead of having crit damage as her bottom left mod, I have attack up when impaired. So the reasoning behind that is because there's so many blue toons on defense that now have impair weapons. So I'm trying to leverage that because if Priya ends up getting impaired when she rushes, so even on the first attack, it means she'll get an attack boost on all the other attacks after that. And it should come into play both with her double attack as well as her rampage. So overall, it just produces a huge amount of extra damage because the mod affects her attack and not the crit damage, which crit damage only affects the primary attacks, meaning it doesn't count towards double attacks or the rampage damage. Oftentimes, when I end up facing a team, I really have to focus on who the leader is to start, and that'll help me decide which team I should go in with. Because if you see a specific leader, you have a general idea of what toons are behind it. And in some cases, because you're familiar with the player, you remember their name, you might remember what they're running behind their leader, in which case it becomes a lot easier with your toon and team decisions. It can be a little bit difficult because players do make changes during war, especially because we have a free mod removal for the whole entirety of war, which allows us to make adjustments as we see fit. Now, I haven't made any adjustments during this war, but I feel like other people definitely have, and part of that could also be influenced by the mods provided by the milestones. You can get some gold mods during cross-regional war, and during, I guess, all-out war as well, and these mods can be really valuable. I've gotten some good ones, and I've gotten some really bad ones before. Now, I do wish that they could incorporate more milestones into war, and include maybe a platinum mod as the last mod in the entirety for milestones, even if that was at 200 or 250,000 points. Looking a little more at war, it makes me realize how many more Aaron leads I'm seeing in this war compared to the previous Blitz war. During the Blitz war, I noticed I think more Jackies and Mercers, and only a few Aarons, which was pretty interesting because I remember the cross-regional war before the Blitz war, so a couple weekends ago, there were a lot of Aaron teams, a lot of tanky teams, but it seems like people have gone back towards using Mercer leads, or maybe that might just be the division that I'm in at the moment. I personally found the Aaron lead teams to be more difficult just because of how tanky they ended up being. Instead, I'm seeing teams like this where we see Pete, we have a Minerva, we have Double. I don't know if it's S-class payback Shivas or not, but either way, the payback effect can be really annoying. So I got lucky on my normalize, so now both paybacks are nullified. I'm deciding to rush on Frost, and because of that attack up when impaired mod, Priya ended up doing an enormous amount of damage on Frost, killed Minerva, and did damage on Pete and both Shivas. Because Pete is still taunted for this turn, Princess's rush down the line kills Frost, who is also a reviver, but something I did not take into account is that Pete's weapon has a chance to remove one negative status effect every turn. So Pete ended up removing the taunt, which allowed him to revive both Minerva as well as Frost. So instead of waiting around for my team to die because Minerva rushes and applies infection to two tunes will die because I don't really have a healer, and it just seems like a waste of time. So instead, it was better to move on. And as you see, I was a lot more successful in this match. My Priya does an enormous amount of damage, and I'm able to have a quick match for a quick few points, and I can move on to the next team. I was even able to pick up a war can, which is something I desperately need. I started out with about 30 war cans, and as of now, when I'm making this video, I'm down to about 20. So I'm hoping that tomorrow and for part of tonight I can pick up some more cans, because I would really, really, really love to be able to have about 50 cans for WOC3. I will definitely be saving all my coins basically for either armory tokens, because weapons are such an important factor to this game. And if I don't start upgrading my weapons a bit more, especially my defensive weapons, I will not be ready for WOC3. Some of the weapons that I've seen in this war are just so good and strong that when I look at mine, I just kind of feel a little sad. But I know I focused mainly on getting offensive weapons, and I do believe I made the right decision, because you don't score points by defending, you score points by attacking and making successful attacks. So I know people will argue, well, you have to stay alive in order to attack, but my counter, I guess, to that is it has to depend on like what camp you're in and if you're general as well. So if you're in camp A, general A, you're going to be the first one attacked in most cases. So even if you have an amazing defense, you might have 8 people attacking you within the first 30 seconds. So that's why I focused on my attack team instead of my defense team, because I could have the best defense in the world, but if I cannot attack and kill someone else's team, I am not going to be making up any points. So I may as well just be kind of like a paperweight. I will say that my weapon luck for offensive weapons has been pretty good. I have a rampage weapon, I have 2 team player weapons, Princess's weapon is now a 5-star, which is great. I have a 20% AP to self for my Arav, as well as just his normal weapons, a 5-star weapon. I'm planning on 5-starring my Doc Stevens weapon because it actually came out perfect. So I do have things in the works. I'm just kind of waiting on getting the tokens in order to put my ideas into play. So when I come up against a faction that's a top 5 faction in the game type of thing, I will always end up attacking first, just because, you don't expect to be alive for very long, so the only way you're going to score is by actually attacking. Now, if I needed cans badly at this point, like at this point I still had about 30 cans, then I would probably go for a tower, but at that point I might also be dead. And the only way you get rewards for a battle is by scoring points, and you don't technically get any points for having a tower. You do get points for taking one from someone else though. And something kind of cool, so just before this you saw my Priya rush, but then you saw a second animation of her rushing. So whenever there's reflect damage, it shows the tune rushing again. So that's kind of useful because you know right away if the damage is reflected and if your tune is possibly going to die or not. So you see this defense is very tanky. I'm fleeing it, hopefully getting in one more attack before I end up being destroyed. I have a sliver of HP left, coming up against a fast rushing team. This is the type of team that I would want to use a payback tune on if I had one, but in this case I don't have one, so I have to kind of just work with what I have and hopefully I'll get lucky. So I had 2 stunned at the beginning. I'm using Dr. Stevens for control and AP gain. I'm rushing down that line because even if I don't kill Arav, I'll at least be able to confuse him and potentially impair him as well. So I ended up getting through this defense. I got some lucky stuns at the start, and by the end of this attack, I was dead. So in this match here, I saw an offensive lead, so I decided to try my Victor lead team. So it's technically a turn 1 rushing natural attack team. Pete is a very tanky toon, so it doesn't usually work against him, and that's why I did not command rush Arav, because I didn't think that he could actually make it through Pete successfully. So instead, I end up command rushing him on the second turn. I'm a little shy, and Pete's going to heal. I'm going to have to be mindful of my strategy here. I actually want to defend and not do any more damage so that I don't charge his AP, and then I rush Arav to finish it. Thank you everyone for watching and listening to my video.